Most people in the Middle Ages didn't eat like kings. They ate what they could grow, find, or trade: grains, vegetables, maybe some cheese if they were lucky. There weren't recipes or fancy ingredients, just a fire, a pot, and whatever was on hand. It wasn't pretty, but it worked. And honestly, some of it still does. These meals were simple, filling, and made to get people through hard days. If you like cooking that's real, this might be right up your alley. Here are 5 meals medieval peasants actually ate. And yes, you can still make them today. Pottage, the endless stew. Pottage was the medieval version of throw it in the pot and hope for the best. And it worked. It was the daily go-to for peasants across Europe. There wasn't one single recipe for it, because it was more about using what you had than following a formula. You had a pot hanging over the fire, you made pottage. Most days, that meant grains like barley or oats simmered with water, plus whatever vegetables were growing or left from the last market. Onions, leeks, carrots, turnips, maybe some cabbage if it was in season. If there was a bone lying around, it went in too, just to pull out a little flavor. Dried peas, lentils, and beans were gold because they added a bit of protein and bulk. What made pottage special was that it never really ended. It was a rolling stew. Yesterday's leftovers became today's base. You'd add more water, more scraps, and let it bubble away. It was eaten for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. People even carried it to the fields in clay pots. It was thickened with breadcrumbs or coarser grains when needed, and stretched to feed a family for days. Spices? Rare. But herbs like thyme, sage, or parsley from the garden gave it enough flavor to keep things from getting dull. If you want to make it now, start with a grain like barley or red lentils. Toss in chopped onions, carrots, leeks, and greens like kale or cabbage. Simmer low and slow with some garlic and herbs. The longer it cooks, the better it gets. It's the ultimate make-do dish, and after a bowl of it, you'll see why it stuck around for centuries. Barley bread, tough loaf, tough life. Bread was the backbone of the medieval diet, but not the kind we're used to today. For peasants, there was no soft, fluffy white bread. That was reserved for the upper class who could afford finely milled wheat flour. What most people ate daily was dense, coarse, and usually made from barley, rye, or whatever grain happened to grow in the region that year. Barley was common because it was hardy and didn't need great soil or perfect weather. That made it a perfect crop for people who were living on the edge, literally and economically. The bread it produced was dark, heavy, and a bit sour, especially when it was fermented naturally. Think sourdough without the Instagram hype. Most peasant homes didn't even have ovens. Wood was expensive and hard to come by, so bread was either baked in communal ovens, shared by the village, or it was made in simpler ways, like flat rounds cooked on a hot stone near the hearth or inside a cast iron cauldron buried in coals. To make a version today, you only need a few ingredients: barley flour, water, salt, and if you're feeling authentic, a bit of wild yeast or sourdough starter. Mix it up into a sticky dough, form it into a flat disc, and either bake it or cook it in a dry skillet. You won't get a big rise. It's not meant to be light and airy, but you'll get a chewy, nutty, earthy bread that's surprisingly filling. Top it with cheese, dip it in stew, or just tear off a hunk and eat it plain. It's rough, it's honest, and it'll fill you up like food is supposed to. Leek and onion griddle cakes, the first handheld meal. Before sandwiches, before granola bars, before food trucks, there were griddle cakes. And if you were a peasant in medieval Europe, these quick-fried patties were about as convenient as food got. Fast to make, easy to carry, and filling enough to get you through hours of labor in the field or woods. The stars of this meal: leeks and onions. These alliums were absolute kitchen workhorses in the Middle Ages. They grew in poor soil, lasted through the winter, and added flavor when you didn't have much else to work with. Mix them with a little flour, barley, oat, or rye, plus water, and you had a batter ready to hit the hot stone or griddle. No eggs, no milk, no oil unless you were lucky, just simple ingredients and heat. Once cooked, these cakes had crispy edges and a soft, savory center. They were eaten warm when fresh, or wrapped up in cloth and taken into the fields. Some folks might have sprinkled a bit of salt on top, or added herbs like parsley or chives if they had a garden nearby. It wasn't fancy, but it was honest, and it tasted like what it was: food made from the land around you. To make a version today, sauté chopped leeks and onions until soft and slightly browned. Let them cool a bit, then mix them into a thick batter with whole grain flour. like rye or barley, and just enough water to hold it together. Pan-fry small spoonfuls in a bit of oil or over a dry skillet if you're roughing it. Eat hot and enjoy with a smear of cheese or a dab of mustard if you want to dress it up. Rustic, quick, and deeply satisfying, this was medieval fast food done right. Cheese and greens tart, foraged flavor in a crust. This wasn't a pie for showing off. It was for stretching whatever you had into something filling, shareable, and just a little bit comforting. Peasants didn't waste food, and when meat wasn't an option, which was often, they turned to wild greens and soft cheese to pull together a meal that was both practical and, in its own way, kind of beautiful. The crust was as basic as it gets: coarse flour and water, maybe a splash of oil or lard if the household could spare it. Rolled or pressed thin, it formed a rustic base that could hold whatever greens were pulled from the garden or foraged from hedgerows: nettles, dandelion, sorrel, chard, or even young beet leaves. These were boiled or wilted down, mixed with onion or garlic if it was around, and blended with soft, homemade curd cheese, the kind made from leftover milk and a little rennet or vinegar. It wasn't a quiche. There were no eggs or cream. But when the greens and cheese baked into that crust, it came out rich, earthy, and deeply satisfying. If you want to try this today, sauté chopped greens, spinach, chard, or kale all work great, with some onion and garlic. Mix in ricotta, cottage cheese, or crumbled goat cheese. Press a whole grain dough into a tart pan or oven-safe skillet, fill it with your mixture, and bake at 375 degrees Fahrenheit, 190 degrees Celsius, until the edges are crisp and the filling is set, about 25 to 30 minutes. It's not flashy, but it's exactly the kind of thing you'd want to eat after a day working outside. Nutritious, warm, and made with what you've got. A quiet kind of comfort food that earned its place at the table. Oat Grul, the original morning fuel. Out of all the foods peasants relied on, oat gruel might have been the most basic, but also the most dependable. It was the kind of meal you could always count on, even when your cupboards, or sacks more likely, were nearly empty. Oats were cheap, grew well in northern climates, and kept well through the winter. Gruel was simply oats boiled in water, or sometimes milk if you had access to a cow or goat. That's it. No sugar, no toppings, no flavorings, unless you got creative or had something extra lying around. For most, this was breakfast, sometimes dinner too. Kids grew up on it, old folks depended on it, and workers ate it before heading out for long days in the field. On better days, you might find a bit of dried fruit, a drizzle of honey, or some herbs stirred in. Savory versions were common too, especially with chopped onion or garlic, or maybe some wild greens added toward the end. Don't confuse this with modern oatmeal. Gruel was thinner, more like a porridge soup hybrid. You weren't making a cozy bowl for Instagram. You were filling your belly with something warm, cheap, and sustaining. To make a version today, boil rolled oats, or steel cut if you want to get closer to the original texture, in water with a pinch of salt. Stir often so it doesn't stick. Want savory? Add caramelized onions, herbs, maybe even a spoonful of broth. Want sweet? Try honey, cinnamon, or raisins. It's endlessly adaptable. It won't win any awards, but there's something grounding about it. In a world full of overcomplicated breakfasts, oat gruel is a reminder that sometimes simple really is enough. The people behind these meals weren't trying to be clever. They were just trying to get through the day, feed their families, stretch their supplies, and make something warm to carry them through the cold. But in the process, they built a food culture rooted in resilience, creativity, and practical wisdom. They didn't have grocery stores, food blogs, or 15-minute meal kits. They had grains, greens, fire, and a little time. And somehow, that was enough. What's wild is how much of this still works. These dishes might come from another century, but they don't feel out of place now, especially if you're trying to eat simpler, waste less, or reconnect with what food actually is. Not every meal needs to be impressive. Sometimes it just needs to be real. So yeah, maybe gruel won't go viral. Maybe barley bread won't make it into cookbooks. But these humble meals kept people going for centuries. And there's something kind of beautiful about that. Next time your fridge is empty or you're tired of overthinking dinner, try cooking like a medieval peasant. You might just discover something you didn't know you were missing.